the first thing we're going to get into here, and I'll talk a little bit more about news talk as we go along, is what you've got to do to be of relevance is you've got to define your own unique selling point. And I'll give you an example. When I worked at News Talk and I was interviewing for roles, and we might advertise a researcher on the Moncrief show or a producer on the Breakfast Show, and I would have 150 CVs on my desk, and I would routinely tear off the first page. So the page that had your address and your qualifications, I'd rip it off and go to the second page, which I hoped would start to tell me a bit about you and what you were about, what you liked, what you got into, what you did in your spare time, because that for me was going to tell me more about the individual than if you got a C or you got an honors leaving cert. Or so that's for me pushing somebody into define your unique selling point. This was a picture I had of my office in News Talk, which was the definition of insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I would challenge researchers and News Talk all the time to say, but we're doing a piece of content here that RTE did, or we're doing a piece of content that's no different. So why would we do it and expect people to tune in? And it was again a deliberate prod at people to say you've got to be different in every way you think. And it was about the importance of standing out. So let me go back to News Talk for a second. So News Talk was set up. It was with Claire Byrne, who you all know, Jerry Gilroy from Off the Ball, who was they were our morning anchors. And it was very much about having a clear vision for what we wanted to do. We had a blank page of paper. We had investors who were keen for it to succeed, but we had a blank. We were the creative experts, and we were given a license to come up with something that had to be an alternative to RTE. So what we came up with was something that we felt needed to be younger, more liberal, more fun, that the presenters were going to be new, unknown, and untried. And we would have idealistic approaches. And the key review every week was if we sounded anything like RTE, we failed. So if we had Hillary Clinton on the Breakfast Show and Morning Ireland had Hillary Clinton on the Breakfast Show, our interview had got to be entirely different. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. And our tagline was different nation, different station, because we wanted to reflect a new multicultural, liberal generation that was coming up. And that was fantastic to be a part of. I'll not go into too much detail because it was part of my life for 20 years. And it was, as my wife said, it was our first child in terms of I spent more time in News Talk than I did with my two kids at the time. So what I would say, moving it in, is for you guys, what would be your unique selling point? If you were to put down 3 words that would define your uniqueness, and what they should be is the top of any resume, the top of any pitch that you're going to do has got to have those 3 points, those 3 adjectives. So I want you to write them down over the course of this course. We probably won't have time tonight to go through it, but I think it's an exercise that you can amend, you can update, but I think you'll find very beneficial. The next part is pitching great ideas. And again, my time in News Talk, we had Breakfast Show, we had mid-morning show, midday, Moncrief, The Right Hook, Off the Ball, weekend schedule with maybe 20 shows, all looking to be fed with great ideas. So for researchers in particular and presenters, we needed to come up with ideas that were unique, that were not in another radio station, but you had to pitch them to me. And it wasn't the case of saying, I heard such and such being interviewed on another station, we should get them on. This had got to be as unique as possible. And I came up with a way of, I suppose, giving this back to my team to say, when we're creating a compelling story, there's got to be 3 P's that you've got to ensure that are in it. Number 1, purpose. So why are we doing the effing story to begin with? And why are we doing it? You got to tell me why we're doing it. Give me a compelling reason. Number 2, what's the point of difference? So if it's strong enough and it maybe is a top story on another station, why are we going to have a point of difference? So someone's going to leave Today FM, RTE, Red FM, and come and listen to us. And thirdly, the performance. So what are we going to put into it for the presenter to hang on to in terms of a really strong hook? And ultimately, what's the audience going to take away from it? So what are they going to have as that, they call the water cooler moment the next day when someone says, did you hear that story yesterday on the radio? One example that I always use, Sean Moncrief, who presents in News Talk, who, I've worked with some fantastic presenters, but he's probably the most iconoclastic and unique presenter. And he was interviewing a guy who had written a book about Tourette's. So this guy was being interviewed on live radio about a book that he had written about Tourette's. And over the course of the interview, if you've got Tourette's, as you know, you're swearing, and every second phrase is fuck, shit, bollocks. So you go along this interview. Sean was able to inject humor into it. The guy was clearly very nervous. And at the very end of the interview, Sean said, before I let you go, when you're pissed off about something, what curse words do you use? And it was just, it floored the guy in terms of, because he'd never been asked such a fantastic question. But there's a uniqueness in terms of taking a very difficult subject matter, a difficult interviewee in terms of the guy's nervousness and anxiety, adding humor into it, but also having a memorable moment to take away. So for you guys, create your 3 Ps, your purpose, your point of difference, and your performance. Then you've got your communication pillars. Once you agree on those 3 Ps, you're developing your story. The other elements are the audience, because you're going to have different radio stations who have different audience. We'll talk later to Rebecca from 98 and Michaela from iRadio. Again, different audiences, youth orientated, music. So again, the same story can be carved up in so many different ways based on the audience profile. And the third piece is the impact. You've got to have impact. There's got to have a promise that you're going to give the listener that if you tune into us, we're going to actually give you something so fantastic. It's either going to make you laugh, it's going to make you cry, it's going to make you upset, it's going to make you mad. But there has to be an emotional attachment. So it's about how do you want your audience, what do you want your audience to know, do, and feel? It's those 3 emotional elements. You got to give them the information. But what do you want them to do after that? Do you want them to laugh listening to it? Do you want them to, download a podcast that you've suggested? Do you want to make them feel quite emotional? But you've got to have those front of mind. And it's very much works on a content pyramid. It's not, goes back decades and decades in any newsroom, any programming department, that when you're putting together a piece of content, you've got to have these 3 components in it. You've got to have a headline or a tease line or a promo. You got to be able to tell me in 10 seconds, this is it. So we all know what a headline is in the newspaper, but in an audio sense, it's a teaser, it's a coming up. So coming up after the break, we're joined by Because. And again, a big bugbear of mine in radio is when radio presenters fail to tease people through ad breaks and waste an opportunity to just say, come back in a few minutes after an ad break, as opposed to saying, here's, we've got a fantastic piece of content, stay with us. So it's the headline, then it's the key facts. So this is, you're selling it to them. And then thirdly, you use the opportunity to reinforce your message. All of this, I presume Teresa will send around as a presentation, so don't worry about jotting them all down. So what would I be encouraging you to do? Be different and think different. You got to stand out. And when you go for a role in a radio station, it's that uniqueness that Gabrielle and Beat or Michael Byrne and WLR or Patricia Monaghan and News Talk, they're looking for people to join their team that are going to make them sound different. I'd also encourage you to take risks. And what I mean by that, it doesn't mean you go on and say something outrageous on air and end up getting sued. This is about trying new ideas, taking risks with audio, whether that's in production, taking risks on guests. You might want to try something new on air, but no one will fault you for taking risks, even if they don't succeed. And thirdly, demanding performance from yourself, because there's again, like most sectors, people become complacent. People think I've got the job, or I've got the role, so I'm just gonna keep going here in the way I'm doing it. That continuous ability to demand performance from yourself, right? So, where to find original content? And this is, again, something we'll talk to the lads after, Rebecca and Michaela. For me, I was obsessed, and probably still am obsessed, with people finding new ways to find content, and new ways that maybe were old ways. If you follow me for a second. So how do you source content for a show, and what 3 sources would you use? So does anybody want to volunteer where they would source content from if you were to?
Social media.
Okay, when you say social media, is there a certain platform, or is it?
Yeah, so depending on the kind of show it is, like if it's kind of like a music show, I'd say like goss pages or celeb pages, that kind of thing, and seeing like what's been posted, and then that's good content for a show. And then for news ones as well, like news things on Instagram, by the way. Like I'd say Instagram would be a good one, and TikTok now as well, because that's a thriving platform.
Cheers, great. Matthew, anybody else want
to? Twitter. Twitter was a huge one.
Say it again, sorry.
Twitter,
yeah.
I was going to say press releases. Get yourself onto the press release list.
Yeah.
I was going to say go out and talk to people.
Yeah, very good. I like that. I'll tell you why I like it in a minute, but
I was actually going to say discussion boards, like boards.ie and places like that.
Yeah. So again, it's what I'm probing here is you've got to find new and unique ways to find. Sorry, you've got to find new sources for you to find unique content. If we're all looking in the one direction, and we're all, if we're all on Twitter searching, then we're all going to, I'm going to say every researcher in every station, if he or she's just looking on Twitter, then we're going to end up with the same answers. So So what if the lights went out? So what if you, and I did this routinely in News Talk, you arrive into the radio station, there's no internet, there's no newspapers, you have no access to radio or TV. The only access you have is to making telephone calls, and you need to originate 2 stories for your show coming up, and you need to call 2 people. So a couple of questions here. Who would you ring, and what stories you think you would come up with? So for 5 minutes, I want you to get social media out of your brain, close Twitter, and think of a scenario where you're faced with nothing other than making 2 telephone calls. Who would you call, and what type of content could you get? So 5
Can
minutes.
I just answer if I know who I'd call?
You can, yeah, you can. But what I'm going to give everybody 5 minutes. It's past now. If we do it up to 25 to, and we might just go around the houses to see how people have found this.
Is there a target audience of age we keep in mind, or what kind of show it is?
Up to you. You decide.
Okay, perfect.
How did you get on? Who wants to go first?
Jeez, I don't mind going, Garrett.
Geez, Stephen, you bet me to it.
Well, you can work away, Kirsty.
No,
if
off you
want,
go, off you
go. Fair enough. Cheers, Kirsten. Hi, Garrett. Stephen here. I suppose I hope I got the idea of the assignment right. My 2 friends, I suppose the first friend I'd call, well, the first person I'd call, I went for 2 friends because I think that makes sense in this situation. One is my good friend Connor. He works for the ESB, and he's actually in charge of putting back up the poles for when electricity does go out. So I think that would be an informative conversation on what's going on, what's happened, and when it'll be sorted. And I guess we're going straight to the source and the ground level to see why the lights are out. So I think that straight away is an appealing topic, considering if the lights are out, people are going to want to know why, especially maybe community radio.
Yeah.
And then my second call is again a friend, Darren, who happens to be an expert in home finance. So I suppose in the current climate, if the electricity is out, it's a good opportunity to discuss some tips on saving money and using less electricity. We could keep it fun, have some guests ring in and discuss their ideas and success stories of saving money. So I think they're both topical to the situation we're in, and I think they'd enjoy it.
Great. Well done. That's good. Good. Okay, Kirsten, you want to go next?
So the first person I would ring is a local hairdresser, mainly because they have all the goss and they seem to know all the stars. So that's where I'd go first. I worked in a salon, so not much gets past you when you work in there. Especially, I suppose, the target audience for what I'd be going for is people in their kind of 20s, 30s. So that's where I'd kind of go for that kind of gossip. And then the second one then is my friend Tyke actually works for Hot Press magazine. So I'd ring him just to find out about some upcoming gigs, and just kind of give people the lowdown on some gigs that are coming up, and maybe then I could get maybe someone who is gigging if they're local involved, and maybe get an interview out of that.
Great, good stuff. Who wants to go?
I'll go.
I'll go.
Yeah.
Aisling, I think you went first.
Oh, okay. So again, I kind of went with the 2 friends aspect, but I also tried to aim it at 2 friends who I know talk a lot, both Corkmen, so that they have the gift of the gab. The first would be a friend of mine, Owen. He's in an up and coming band called True Tides, and they kind of hang out with Coronas a lot. So he'd have a lot of kind of funny stories about things like that. And he'd have a lot of information as well, because he used to be a solicitor before he did music. So he'd have a lot on the kind of behind the scenes of the music industry and how difficult it is, and a lot of interesting things like that. The second I'd call is another friend of mine. He is a councillor in Cork, but his brother is the Minister for Public Expenditure. So he what it'd be like working kind of in the background in that kind of situation again, and the reality of being kind of the second in the family in politics and the impact that has on family. And at the moment, like politicians get a lot of bashing and stuff like that. So it'd be very interesting to hear from the kind of behind the scenes of that.
Very good, very good. Emma, were you next?
Yeah, I'll go next. So I'd call my granny because she liked the hairdresser idea. She'd know everything about everything going on in the local area. And you could just chat away to her about what's happening. She probably could tell you why the electricity was gone as well. And then second is I'd call my granddad because he has a million stories. He's traveled loads. He went to the Congo. He was in the army. So he just has so many stories that you could get out of him.
Brilliant, brilliant.
And
Very
he's a great
good.
laugh as well. So
Good. We'll need laughs when the lights go out. Yeah. Who? Sabrina?
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of less specific in terms of the people, but like Emma there, I did say a grandparent or somebody who could kind of retell their stories about having no electricity or whatever. But then I also said maybe going out and finding a busker on the street and getting an interview of them and their story and their journey, and they could also provide music, I guess, if they had CDs. Or then even if a couple of friends, I just said generically a couple of friends, and you could do like a quiz show with them or a little competition style thing.
Great, very good. Who's next? Who wants to?
I'll go.
Oh, who's that? Who's that?
Me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought that if the lights went out and there was no internet, no newspapers, and no TV, it would be the biggest news story ever. So I'd ring my husband first of all. He's got sight loss and he's got a lot of knowledge about technology. So he'd have a great insight into how this would affect the blind community and visually impaired community. Also, I'd ring a charity to find out how the idea that there'd be no newspapers, no internet, no TV would affect either the older people or the service users of whatever particular charity was happened to be on my phone. Because in this scenario, I was thinking only the contacts on my phone I was going to be able to look up, because as you said, there's no newspapers, no TV.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Okay, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was similar to Emma as well. First person I thought of was my nanny. She's nearly 94 and she obviously has stories upon stories, but my granddad was the chief super back in the day. And then the second person I was thinking was the chief super of the guards these days, because it was 100 years of An Garda Síochána last week. So just it'd be something if obviously all the lights went out and there was no news anywhere. I would assume the guards still be, in full force. And sure, they've got plenty of stories. And be more of the angle of what's changed over the years.
Brilliant, brilliant, great. Who's next?
I go next. Is Derek here?
Derek, go. Sorry, go.
So I was thinking I'd ring my local nursing home. Having worked in the nursing home, I know that there's always one leader of the posse. And there's always a good lively character in the nursing home that you can get speaking directly to, and they always have lots of stories that they can tell. And it'd be an interesting take on it as well, just what life was like when the pace wasn't as fast. And then secondly, then I play in a band myself, and I do a one-man gig as well. So I'd probably ring a friend of mine. He's in a wedding band, and I'd hope for the best that he was actually at a wedding ready to set up and everything had docked, and then there was like 200 guests there, and maybe even better again, a bride or a groom or something like that that was willing to talk about what the day was going to be like with no internet or radio or TV or whatever.
Very good, very good. Great. Who have we left?
I could jump in there if you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I took it kind of just as like, trying to prepare a show without, having the internet to, for resources or anything, So I took the approach of like, if I'd ring into a bar I used to work in here in Galway called the Roisin Dove. It's a big part of the music scene here in Galway, of ringing the one of the owners there and just talking about the kind of live performance art scene in Galway, and kind of just take more of the approach of like trying to put together a show of discussing how the arts and the entertainment industry has been trying to bounce back in a post-COVID world. Similarly, I was thinking of calling one of the main theatres here in Galway, which would be the Town Hall Theatre, who'd organize a lot of like the live events and stuff around here, and just talking about pre-COVID and post-COVID. It was more not trying to lean on any easy resources I could ring in that I already have in my phone book, and yeah, world with no internet, but just kind of trying to put together a show in looking at, you know, the live entertainment industry, especially in a place like Galway, which was apparently the capital of culture in 2020, which is great crack. But just talking about how it's bouncing back from a kind of post-COVID scenario.
Brilliant, very good. A couple more.
Yeah, I can jump in as well if you want.
Yeah.
My answers may not be as good, but I put down my auntie as one because she, like they said, have a load of different stories. But the funny thing about hers is that her stories, they're not outrageous, but they're just ridiculous as well. And I think that would be funny entertainment, like, because she always has something you wouldn't expect. Like, just imagine if the power went out, the story she'd have about that. That's what I thought. People would just be listening in and they'd be laughing away. And yeah, I put down fellow presenters as well if you were in a radio station, because they'd obviously be doing kind of prep before a show, or I wouldn't call one who's on after, but I'd probably call one like during the weeks. They're always like staying current on everything usually, so see what their take is on it as well.
Brilliant, pretty good. Okay, the final. We got everybody.
I think I'm the last one.
Okay, go for it.
I think I would call my friend who was a journalist for many years and kind of ask her about, like, obviously she wouldn't maybe be able to name names, but because she's out of the profession, she might feel a bit more comfortable kind of like divulging things. Like there's this thing called blind items recently where they like speak about celebrities, but they don't say the names. So that could be interesting.
Yeah.
And then my other friend who works in mental health as a nurse, it would be interesting for her to speak on that, just because, you know, right now it's something that's so needed. So it would be a good time to talk about it.
Excellent. Well, look, I suppose the exercise here was to get you to think outside where you currently may go for stories. So we all go to social media, of course. We all are on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, and we're always going to go there. But if everyone's going there, you're going to come up against your ability to be unique. So what I would be encouraging you to do is build up your own contact base, and that is your granny, that is the hairdresser, that is people in your community. Of course, if you're moved into, you know, let's say you're presenting a music show on Today FM or on Spin FM, and you need to get in with some of the big record companies, you know, all those developments come, but find who would be your go-to people when you're under pressure for content, or you need to come up with some unique content. That makes sense? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was great.
So one point that I wanted to lean in on as well is about the power of mentors. And this is something that, again, I've learned over my time, and always like to push back on people who are starting out, because I found people who ended up being mentors of mine being hugely influential in my career, but also people who you can lean on when you're under pressure. So there are 3 mentors in my world, or have been. There's the Jedi, there's the coach. So any Star Wars fans will know where I'm going with the Jedi, the coach, and obviously if we're a fan of The Apprentice. So the Jedi. So if you want to be the best, who is your Jedi? So it's someone who you know doesn't have to be in your industry, but someone who's got years of wisdom and experience. They might be able to provide some insight into your industry and fine-tune your skill, but not necessarily. But they've been there and done it all. and they'll help you identify and hone your strengths. And it's someone that you identify now and you actually actively engage with. So that's the Jedi. The coach is the most important one. That's someone who's in your corner on a Monday morning when you have had a desperate weekend, or on a Wednesday when you've had a shit show on air and the program directors after giving you a bollocking. The coach is the person, he or she is always going to have your back, always going to be in your corner. The person who's going to say, come on, go for it again. Come on, Emma, wasn't that bad. Come on, Stephen, you got to go again. And it's going to give you that psychological lift. And again, identify who that person is now and engage with them and say, I want you to be one of my mentors. And the third, and this is one that I learned as I went along, is what I call the apprentice. And this isn't the older, wiser person. It's actually somebody who is younger than you. And a lot of you who are on the Zoom are in your probably 20s and 30s, so you're young anyway, but do find someone who is younger than you and who can openly give you feedback on your presentation style. So they might say, look, actually, my 16-year-old mates, here's who they would tune into. And it also will keep you fresh in terms of what's happening, new perspectives, new talking points. So it's those three. It's your Jedi, it's your coach, and your apprentice. Find them and turn them into what I call your kitchen cabinet. These are people you're going to talk to on a regular basis who are only going to do it because they like you and are only going to do it because they can help you succeed. They're not looking for any favor in return. Okay. So the future. So for me, so where to next for you guys? If I was to sum up, you've got to be different to stand out. Remember what I said about the CV. When you're putting together your resume, your second page is more important than your first page. I actually don't care where you live or the fact you've got a driving license or you've actually got the same star sign as somebody famous. I want to know what you do and have done so that you're in front of me being interviewed. Think big, be ambitious, surround yourself with good mentors, always back yourself. You're going to have shit days. I do some work with other radio stations and other companies, and I always say that every week you're going to have a shit day. Just start every week knowing one of the days it's going to be a shit day, but that doesn't mean that you give up on that day. Trust your gut instinct. I'm a big believer in trusting your gut instinct. If it feels right and you've slept on it, then chances are it is right. Take those risks with content, with ideas, with pitching ideas, and enjoy it. You got to enjoy it. And I'm a big David Bowie fan, so this was his phrase. I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise it won't be boring. And I think you've got to commit that to yourself, that even though you're not that sure about where you're going, it's actually going to be such a roller coaster of fun and risk and excitement and setbacks. But the passion, as I said in the beginning, will get you there. Always remember, be different, stand out, think big, take risks, surround yourself with good mentors, back yourself, trust your gut instinct, and enjoy it.
Just on that, would you recommend, just for when in thinking of trying to write down 3 USPs throughout the course, would you recommend thinking of that in terms of what you think you could offer yourself as a presenter, or in terms of an idea for a show, or is it really open to interpretation?
I think, look, it'll be an iterative process for sure, because it'll change as you develop, and there may be something that you're good at now, or a genre of music that you're interested in now that may change. But I would say style it on who you are now and what you can offer as the presenter, not the idea. So it's really, if I'm brainstorming here, but if your uniqueness is that, every track ever recorded by a certain artist, or you've got a, you were the world Rubik Cube champion in 1992. Find uniqueness. You all have uniquenesses inside in terms of either, Kirsten's going to top it here on the Rose Tralee, but that's, that's something you did as the sort of outcome, but the journey or the uniqueness, I'd love, for you to even dwell on that, because there was a uniqueness that got you there. It wasn't just the TV show and the judging and so all of you could have been a Rose Tralee. That's basically what I'm saying.
We'll have our own Rose Tralee at the end of this. The end of the course.
Anyone else? Any comments?
Garrett, if you don't mind, you mentioned back in 2002 when News Talk was starting, you were there from the very start. I suppose by the sounds of what we heard last week, it's quite rare for stations to change hand, I suppose, or start at a big level. I suppose what did you learn from that, and how much has News Talk developed from where you were day one, I suppose, to where it is now?
Oh wow, what a
great question.
That was a really good question, Stephen.
Oh, Steve, you got me here. So look, like News Talk started, we had 0 listeners. That like no one had ever heard of the station, bar, there was myself, Jerry Gilroy from Off the Ball. There was a girl called Mary Minahan, who is an Irish Times journalist now. Orla Barry, who is a presenter of the BBC. Like, we were all young. We didn't know what we were doing necessarily, which at the time we thought we knew what we were doing, but we didn't. But we were given, I suppose the point I'd say, we were given a blank page to create something that was younger to what was already there, that was more in tune with the younger generation, that was more ambitious for Ireland. So we sort of had an idea. We had an idealistic approach. We had a history show. I think we were the first station to have a history show on an hour long talking history, which is still there, with Patrick Gagan. With a sex show, which was 10 o'clock at night, which was outrageous for the time, but again, we just did things. We had Off the Ball itself was 5 lads just talking expertly about sport, but it was like eavesdropping on a pub conversation. But we tried lots of things that didn't work. Like David McWilliams, who's a friend of mine, so I don't mind kicking him in the ankles here, but McWilliams was Macker was our breakfast show presenter when we launched, and it sank like a stone. Like he just, he's just couldn't grapple with early mornings, couldn't grapple with breakfast, fast pace of breakfast. With George Hook, who, on the face of it was never going to be a presenter, and ended up sort of saving News Talk in its early days because he grew audience. Now, ultimately, he had a poor ending to his career. But I suppose to summarize it, Stephen, like with 0 listeners, so everything we did, we had to do different because RTE, they were our target. And as I said, if we had Bill Clinton on and they had Bill Clinton on, we'd be different. If they had, if they had the Coronas on and doing a gig, we would have to say, we're going to do a gig, and we're going to actually do it on Grafton Street because we're going to get loads of notoriety as well. And so it's to always think how you can prostitute yourself if you know, how can you get people to talk about you?